Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou. Very warm welcome to everyone. Episode 5 today. Thanks for those that are joining us again in this series, Boosting Your Organisation's Resilience. My name is Philip Roth. I'm a director with BDO here in Christchurch. It's my real pleasure to introduce you to Sam Johnson from the Student Volunteer Army. He's going to be speaking very shortly. I'll get you to introduce yourself in a moment. But look, thanks very much for coming along. Well, I was reminded by my Auckland colleagues who are helping host the session today that we're all understanding what resilience is all about, Sam. So those that live on the North Shore in Auckland that drive into central Auckland, we've got a lot of empathy for you in terms of what resilience looks like. So through the process that we've been working through, this RETHINK process, we're going to be focusing on that green area in the middle in terms of embedding resilience and keeping your business running. We'll be talking about some real life case studies, and in particular, Sam's going to share some really interesting and insightful learnings around your journey over the last 10 years in particular, Sam.
We hope. Yeah.
I'm very confident we will. So looking forward to that presentation very shortly. And I know you'll enjoy that as well. I do want to put a bit of a shout out for the fact it is Mental Health Awareness Week. And I know that a number of people in New Zealand are doing pretty tough at the moment. So let's keep things positive and pragmatic and real. So when we go through some of these presentation notes and anecdotes, please feel free. You'll see the dialogue box there where you can send through some questions to us. We'll have a bit of a Q&A session for about 15-20 minutes in the second part of the presentation. We'll be happy to take your questions. Please fire them through. We'll receive them at our end and do that for part 2. So please avail yourself of that opportunity. At the end, I'll explain some tools and templates that we're going to make available on our website. And I'm sure, Sam, you might be available to be contacted as and when required as well. So we'll have some contact details at the end. So that's just a little bit on today's presentation. We'll just move to the next slide. So on the next slide, I had one definition that was given to me recently on the definition of what resilience is actually about. So just reading that out, resilience is what gives business, organisations and individuals the psychological strength to respond and adapt to stress, daily challenges and more significant events in a healthy, positive and adaptive way. It's also about proactively developing a mental reservoir that can help us sustain our mental well-being in challenging times. And Sam, I think you'll agree as well, there's plenty of challenging times that we're going through, but also it's a wonderful opportunity to see how individuals, teams and organisations develop. So that's just one definition that came across my path recently. I'm going to hand over shortly to Sam, but just very briefly, so we're all aware, Sam's currently the Chief Executive of the Student Volunteer Army, and many of you will know him. You may not all know him, but you certainly will shortly. He's most well known for actually founding SVA and turning the student movement into a widely recognised model of community engagement. Now, I was really interested to know when Sam set some statistics through that around about 65,000 primary, secondary school and tertiary students annually are involved with SVA, and that's a huge number, incredible actually. Sam, you're part of the Westpac Sustainability Panel, also on the board of the Prince's Trust in New Zealand. So great to have you on board. Look forward to your presentation, and we'll come back online a bit later with a bit of Q&A.
Yeah, great. Well, kia ora katoa. Thank you, Philip. Thanks for the introduction. Big thanks to the BDO teams, both in Christchurch and around the country, for their support of me personally and support of SVA. We're really privileged to have you guys as our accountants and advisory partners, and it is great. You've helped me out of a couple of pickles across the way, and I'll talk about one of those a little bit in a while about our grocery service and how we worked together after the COVID, when the COVID lockdown first happened. So a real pleasure to be here.
Sure.
So thanks.
Nice to have you along.
Thanks for having me. So today I thought I'm not going to talk too much about what we actually do at Student Volunteer Army, but more about actually how we run and how we sustain ourselves as a volunteer organisation working in the edges of crisis quite often, and really around in the theme boosting organisations' resilience. So if we just move to the next slide, and what you will see is I'll just do a bit of I guess our organisation's whakapapa, really our background, which was after the first earthquake in Christchurch 10 years ago. Now, as Philip just mentioned, Student Volunteer Army is not a Christchurch-based organisation anymore. We've got 65,000 students, as Philip said, every year operating all around the country, huge numbers in most centres in New Zealand and huge numbers in rural locations. Because what we've done, and this has been, I guess, the trick to it, and I think it's the trick in all different types of businesses too, it's scaling things well in a way that others can copy. What we do, I said to a new strategic advisor of ours the other day, what we do is not rocket science. And she turned to me and said, well, actually, maybe it kind of is, because it's quite countercultural. What we do at Student Volunteer Army is get people off the couch and into volunteering, and actually deeper than that, we're getting them to make friends and feel useful and have a sense of purpose in their world. And especially at the moment with the lockdowns, with the social distancing that's required off and on, we're not really creating societies where we interact deeply with each other. So the core of ours, let's jump to the next slide, the core of our work, and this is obviously not a COVID photo, this is from 10 years ago. The core of our work is mobilising large numbers of people to have the sense of permission and the confidence to do what they think is the right thing to do in communities. So it's quite a simple little philosophy. In every community, everywhere, there are people willing to help. And in my observations of what happens typically after every crisis everywhere globally, including actually crisis in our own businesses, our crisis in our own organisations or in the office, people want to help, but are not sure if they're allowed to help. And I put it down to basically a crisis of permission. We've created a world where actually we're not sure if we're allowed to do certain things. So one of the pieces of magic in our organisation and how we've built 65,000 students is we give people permission. I give you permission to go and be a volunteer. I give you permission, it's not mine to give, but I'll give it anyway, to go and actually help someone out. And that, if we go back right to the start of Student Volunteer Army, the very core ethos of it was that I stood up and said, okay, actually, you can go and let's go and help our neighbours. Let's go and help the neighbours on the other side of the city, help them out. Did I have permission to do that? No. Had I asked for permission, I probably would have been told not to do it. And I'll talk a little bit in a wee while about our the COVID response. But had I sat around and waited for permission to do what instinctively I knew was the right thing to do, we wouldn't have done it. The charity wouldn't be in the place it is now. The business wouldn't be in the place it is now, and a whole lot of volunteers, who all of us, many people on this call, we have that inertia to want to help in a crisis. But typically, agencies and larger organisations struggle to deal with that outpouring of activity. So that's what we do. We build big teams, we build team structures, we create patterns of behaviour that allows volunteer groups or happy helpers to copy it and have a great go, have a go at something. So Philip had a chart at the start on react, resilience and readiness. I just thought I didn't put a chart in on this, but I'm really focused on the middle word of there, the resilience part. Okay, because within resilience, there's the four R's. You've got your response, recovery, reduction, and readiness. Now, often this is drawn as a straight line. Here's the four different stages. Now, my view, this is not unique, but it's a circle. And I think all of our businesses, mine included, we are forever going in this circle. And right now in New Zealand, we're in the recovery. We're going to be in the long tail of the recovery of COVID, which typically, and this is globally, organisations, particularly government agencies, don't particularly know how to do recovery well. We're pretty good at stepping up to do response, but when it gets into recovery, it does get trickier. And then moving back into reduction of just actually preparing for next time and getting ready for other crises. That's often underdone as well. So I view that as a cycle. And what we do as an organisation is forever be in that cycle. And I think if we look about the types of crises that we have, and sort of if we look at the core resilience, resilience is the ability to bounce back from shocks. And yeah, it's easy to think that perhaps we're not going to have so many more shocks. But actually, what we know within the disaster community is that half of the crises or disasters that we know could occur haven't happened yet. And 70% of us, 70% of us live, this is natural disasters I'm actually talking about, in disaster-prone areas, let alone all the other types of risks, climate change, cybercrime risks. You know, we don't know what's going to be next, so we've got to carry on that cycle. So with our organisation, this slide here is really just talking about the evolution to stay relevant, showing our brand at the start and brand how it kind of washed up today over 10 years. But we have to keep reinventing ourselves after each crisis to stay relevant. Just like you've got to keep reinventing yourself within whatever different market or organisation or business you're in, to keep making it relevant for what people need today. We like to keep it funky, we like to keep it fun, we keep it moving, and we really work with our teams to make sure they're doing super impactful things. We get our teams at primary school to think of a challenge in their community that they can fix. And this is 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. And they go out there, they plan a project, they build a team, everybody gets a role. There's only a couple of rules. One, you can't work with your best friend, and you've got to work off the school grounds and make something happen. And actually, when you give even 6, 7, 8-year-olds the permission and the tools to do things, they do projects of equal value to our university students. And it's remarkable what they do. So if we jump to the next slide, I thought I'd just mention really around what it is we do, because it would be easy to assume in volunteerism and in student volunteer army, which is a charity, that our product or service is the volunteering, but it's not. What we do, as I mentioned at the start, is we help people feel useful and make friends. They're our two pieces. They're the two pieces of magic within SVA. So within our circle of response, recovery, reduction, readiness, which we go around all the time, we're always looking, what can we do as an organisation and a student movement to help people feel useful, feel their skills are useful, and to make friends. And we do that in a multitude of ways all around the country and with all different types of projects. Jump to the next slide. One of the most successful parts we've done the last couple of years, which enabled us to scale quite significantly, was moving into secondary schools, where we created an SVA Service Award, where we just look to count and to measure and recognise all the types of volunteering that happens in a school anywhere. So we built a little CV builder tool. It was honestly the total MVP. We thought we'd sign up 20 schools in a year, but we signed up 100. And suddenly we tapped into something in the school context where students wanted to reflect back on what they'd done and their types of volunteering, whether they're a hockey coach, whether they're cooking, or whether they're doing whatever sort of service. We wanted them to reflect back on that volunteering and understand it in a global context. So we linked it up to the Sustainable Development Goals, and away they went. But when we really looked at why this was successful, we've now got nearly 200 schools in it. We looked at why it's successful, and the reason is that we stuck to our model of creating high-scale, low-touch programs, and we're really good at that. As an organisation, we're not so good at the high-touch stuff. We're developing our capabilities there, but we know we're really good at this low-touch, high-scale work. We build simple frameworks that are simple to engage with, and that give people that sense of permission. So I guess it comes down to that purpose piece. So when COVID hit this year, it was a definite, oh gosh, what are we going to do in this time? And as a response-based organisation, or as an organisation known for doing things after crisis, we had to think, well, what can we do? And so we pretty easily signed up about 3,000 volunteers all around the country. And as we all have to do in all our organisations, you've got to stay relevant. You've got to move quick, as we all do. So I was chatting with a friend. I thought, oh, actually, well, supermarkets are struggling to deliver food. Well, let's build a system. Let's build a food delivery system as a part of our response, and see what happens. And so within about a course of a week, we through an Instagram chat group with a whole lot of Kiwi entrepreneurs who just come back from the States, we got a couple of incredible minds to come and help our organisation, which we're a small organisation, build a fully end-to-end shopping service within a week. And so you could go on to Student Volunteer Army, order groceries as if it was a New World supermarket. We partnered with New World on it. And we'd send a volunteer into the supermarket. The supermarkets would open early for us. We'd go in, we'd pick the items off the shelf, and at the checkout, they'd be charged to our account, and then we'd charge the person's credit card afterwards. But I mean, I was quite amazed actually at how simple the innovation was. You're sending volunteers into the supermarket to do someone else's shopping for them, someone who's older, someone who's medically vulnerable, and actually how easy it was, in a sense, to get really good advice from like some world experts in technology pretty quickly. As I said at the start, in a crisis, people really want to help. And typically, as organisations, we're not good at accepting help, and we're not good at finding that extra help. So with the grocery service, it had the capacity to deliver up to 10,000 orders a week, and that's a lot of volunteers and a lot of people, but that's the capacity. Obviously, it wasn't needed, and so we sort of carried on. But it's made us question, well, what do we do with this thing now? Yes, we've got this great grocery service and we're piloting a few other products with it, but it actually doesn't matter for us if we don't use it again, because our core business is not running a grocery service. Our core business is making people feel useful and helping them make friends through volunteering. And our service is plugging whatever it is in that gap. After the mosque attacks in Christchurch, there was a need for a free transport service to help families and relations in the Muslim community easily travel from the airport or wherever they were in Christchurch to the mosque or to community locations. So again, what we put in the middle of our system was a taxi service. So a lot of our taxi and Uber companies did this as well, but we just booked out the whole fleet of the university vans, and students were a taxi service for people. Just like after the earthquake, the service was the same, and we just put shovels and wheelbarrows in the middle and watched what happened. So we just jump to the next slide. A couple of the, this is our team grew in the space of about sort of 9 days, from having 6 of us to having 98 of us. And when we would meet for joint team huis, there'd be 3 or 4 Zoom screens full of people who were all doing different things. A lot of people would confuse our model and Student Volunteer Army's model as being a hierarchical one because it's got army in the name, where actually it's super decentralized. We're really good at building big teams of people who can do things and keeping it amazingly simple. So let's just jump to the next slide as I start to wrap up. A couple of the thoughts I had just for today, kind of in closing. The success that we've had, and I think the success to continue, to continue to operate, and to continue to be relevant, and to continue to be useful, has been because we've had a huge group of critical friends around us at SVA. And I love the concept of critical friends. The friend that can ring you up and ask you the challenging question, or the friend who you're having a chat with and you actually invite their honest criticism of what you're doing. One of my favourite roles I have, as Philip mentioned at the start, is I'm on Westpac Bank New Zealand's sustainability panel. And Dave McLean calls us, as a group of 6 of us, the bank's critical friend. And it's sustainability in their case. It's not just sustainability of climate things, but it's climate inequality, and also as a business, how does it survive? It's a unique business. It always does pretty well, but how does it stay relevant for the future? And he calls us their critical friends because we get to ask the questions, and no matter what we do, it's never quite enough. So a question I had for everyone today was, who's your critical friend? If you don't have any, get a couple, and get a couple with completely opposing opinions, and that will certainly help. Finally, resilience. One day I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called "Don't Hit Yourself in the Head with a Hedge Trimmer and Other Bits of Life Advice," because earlier, it was last year actually, April last year. I was out in the garden, as many of us are on a weekend. And I was using an extension pole pruner, and the extension pole pruning is a long pole thing with the clippers on the end and a bit of a rope. And I was trimming this branch, and it was a branch was probably a bit big for the machine. Anyway, got stuck, so I pulled both parts of it, and the head attachment came off the pole pruner. And because I pulled the rope, and the rope's attached to the head attachment, it came flying down and smacked me right between the eyes. And it left me, and it's still recovering from it with an extremely debilitating head injury and subsequent concussion. It taught me a lot about what happens when you're knocked out of your organisation, about literally knocked out, about how it survives without you. We talk about it as the bus test, or we used to talk about it as the bus test. What happens if Sam got hit by a bus, or other team member got hit by a bus? But now actually we talk about it as the hedge trimmer test. What if another person gets hit by a hedge trimmer? And how do you respond to that? How do you look after each other through that time? And how do you prepare for what's coming next? And I say that for 2 reasons. One, if you forget anything else from today, just wear a helmet if you're using a hedge trimmer in the garden. But secondly, and I guess more importantly, is we have no idea what major crises are coming next. Yeah, that's right. The only certainty is that a number of crises are coming, and they come every year in a totally predictable manner. And if the insight I got from working for a few years in the disaster risk reduction space, both here and overseas, is that you expect these crises to come, and those who do well prepare for them, and they prepare for them to come back again and again and again. And you've got to build your system, you've got to build your system to respond, recover, reduce the risk, and be ready for whatever's next. But you never know if you need to become a food delivery business, if you need to be a taxi service, or you need to be whatever it is. But get your system sorted so that you can actually keep doing what you need to do at the right time. So that's a little snapshot of my world, and yeah.
Great, thanks, Sam. I'm very confident that our viewer audience will be really encouraged by that, and I think it's good you put the challenge out as well, especially when you said about your critical friend or two. I think that's something we can all take away, contemplate, and actually do something about. Yeah. Do you mind, just folks, you've got an opportunity now just to get some of your questions through. We'll be starting to answer those really shortly, certainly to the best of our ability. But please, now's the best time to just fire those through, and we'll collate those. Sam, if I may, there was something you mentioned to me when we were preparing for today, which was, and if I may ask you, you said you had the head injury last year, but then you sort of relapsed a bit. Do you just want to, not glorifying the relapse, but actually what did that tell you? Just explain to the viewers what actually happened, and actually what sort of poignant messages come out of, dare I say it, take 2? Yeah,
take 2. Take 2 was worse than take 1. Interesting. Only because it hit me completely by surprise. So I felt by January this year that I was by February I really started to get better. And of course, you get better from a head injury from anyone who's known who's had one. That it takes a long time, and then when you do get better, it's easy just to throw yourself straight back into everything. So then the lockdown happened, and I spent 10 hours a day on a screen.
Interesting.
Head injuries and screens don't go well together. So that ended up causing me a complete relapse, to the point where I could, could barely look at, you go to bed at 8:15 at night and no more than 3 hours screen time a day, including TV, including phone, including computer. But it's amazing, and I had to adapt to do everything suddenly on paper. Could only work on paper, and had to be really. It was really challenging. And it's easy to jump back into these things, and as I say, you don't know what's coming next. But generally, we're underprepared for risk. And I think that's yes, we're really good at being a sort of country we jump up and respond. Oh, look at us, that's great. But you actually shouldn't have to be like that. We should be able to cope with it. And I think that's the number one lesson that I've had with our organisation over the last 10 years. We've had to build it to a place, and it's not there yet, but we're at least now on the right track, I think, of being prepared for whatever comes.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because it's sharing some personal stuff. I think, people will have their own stories. And I think that the poignant bit for me was that it was actually harder the second time round. And, someone's got to be prepared for, resilience doesn't mean that it's not going to always be easy. In fact, it's often harder. But it's having those processes in place, which you've obviously done. So, no, that's great. Look, we're coming into land before we take a few more questions. I've literally just put a couple of 3 slides together here just to wrap the session up. This is something that really caught my eye. It was actually in the context of, you'll see there a Harvard Business Review, just a little snippet that came through. And it was actually under a major heading, believe it or not, on adaptability and resilience. And look, this is certainly not about preaching to people, but I quite like these 5 little principles that came through about, in a time of crisis or wanting to apply adaptive leadership, what are some things we can do? So leaders facing today's level of uncertainty need to be ready to quickly adapt, which is sort of what we've just been talking about. We sort of can't wait forever. We actually need to mobilise and do something. But how can you move an organisation when it's facing a lot of unpredictability, imperfect information, and, dare I say it, multiple unknowns? So these are just some suggested thought processes that you might go through, which are the likes of prioritising evidence-based learning. In other words, don't just do the learning, but actually prioritise the stuff that actually has meaning and evidence behind it, which I think is actually important. Secondly, stress testing any of our theories that we've got. I still think any idea is a good idea, but make sure that we get people contributing their ideas around the table, making sure we're transparent about who's making the decisions. I think when we're going through multiple layers of uncertainty, both vertical and horizontal, whatever they may be, people are desperate more than ever for leadership. And it's actually okay to lead. It's okay, like we said before, you don't need permission. Yes, you've got to use wisdom, because there's consequences and risk management, but do something. And mobilise collective action. And that's what FCA is all about. I think I couldn't have thought of a better scenario today than have you along, Sam, because it is about collectivism and doing it together. And lastly, emphasising that we coordinate, we partnership, we dialogue, and we make sure that we're actually moving ahead in the same direction, not on tangents, etc. So just wanted to pull that sort of just as I suppose, an encouragement and a challenge to us all in the roles that we play with leadership. And finally, just I suppose some little bits and pieces I actually got some information here from a psychiatrist, good friend of mine, Dr. Brandon Strange. So thank you shout out to him. I mean, he's dealing with resilience discussions, coaching and counselling. Dare I say it, our counsellors in New Zealand are just completely booked out. And as we know, that is still a strategic high priority for New Zealand. And I believe it's probably even more important now than ever, Sam. But, things like empathising, listening, I know these are pretty honest, pretty open, candid things. Being honest. It's actually, I'm finding people are being really candid these days about just the fact they may not be feeling so good about things. So in this resilience space, make sure that you've got a buddy system in place. I know with my team, we have every single person who's paired up with a buddy, and they know they can go and talk to that person. It's got to be safe, it's got to be managed. Making sure we give clear plans and guidelines as to what our expectations are. Getting the whole team involved, that same theme again. Be creative. You said the same thing. Be innovative. It's all right. And trying not to get paralysed. It's actually an easy thing to do because you can look down and not up. So, you know, think about these things as tips that can help you.
I'd add one to the list.
Far away, Sam.
We used to run this mental health return to work program,
right.
and it was we'd match a young person who got referred to us by a GP with mild to moderate anxiety or depression, and we'd match them with a grandparent figure, and they'd both go volunteering together. But the point about it, I mean, it immensely helped both the people. And it wasn't in sort of it was kind of a tour kind of Tina model, a mentoring model of older and younger. But what we find, we just have our research of the volunteers show that you go out volunteering, you feel better. And it's not about the volunteering, you're just helping someone else. You're getting out of your own head and you're out there doing something for someone else. And it has a remarkable impact on your mental health.
I like that. It's great, and it's a generational thing too, isn't it? So you've actually got 3 generation gaps in there.
Yeah, you've got a generational thing, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. I think we've just kind of lost a little bit of just getting out there and helping someone. And because when you get out of stop worrying about yourself and you get out and doing something, actually you feel pretty good. You get a total buzz about it. And I think people often say, "Oh, volunteering, is it all about altruism?" It's like, no, there's very few real altruists in the world. Let's be honest. People are actually quite selfish and are in it for themselves, which is okay, but let's find ways that you actually, you benefit from it as well. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, let's not be too precious about it.
No, don't be too precious about it. Let's not cook it all up. It's you actually can help someone else, which we all do anyway, right? But you help someone and it helps you, and that's okay. Particularly with the mental health crisis that we're facing, it's not all. We've got to move it away from being all focused on the person. Actually, help that person focus on someone else and watch what happens. It's good.
Good. Well, that sort of leads into the second to last slide here. I'm not going to read these all out, but there's just a couple of three I will, which is just some final tips to help you enhance your resilience and mine and Sam's. I've deliberately worded it with not just accepting a problem, but actually accepting it as an opportunity.
You never waste a good crisis.
You never waste a good crisis. It's the same thing. Bang on, I was about to say the same thing. So, look, we've got to face problems in life and business and organisational development, but let's treat it as an opportunity. Look, some of these things are a bit self-explanatory. You look at something like exercise daily. I notice a lot of my friends and people in business have been saying things like, "I haven't been to the gym for a month. Gosh, it's been ages since I've gone for a run." I actually think it's important to exercise is not about running a marathon, but it's about doing something. And actually we're finding, even with our team, doing boot camp and actually collectivising the team with an incentive is actually a great thing to do. A lot of what your team do is physical exertion as well too, so it's good they're actually out there doing it. So just want to put a wee shout out for that. Look, the other one is that third to last one. Talk to someone. It's the most understated, non-Kiwi thing to do for a lot of people, but actually I'm seeing more and more people reach out and saying, "You know what, can we have a chat?" And I think that's absolutely imperative and it's wonderful. We should encourage it. So just a few tips and tricks there to give you. Look, we're just going to just have a quick look here because I can see I've had a few buzzed in questions coming through. So give us a moment while we look. We've got one already for you, Sam. I knew you'd get the first question. So Sam, I will direct the first one to you. Is the way that you've mobilised the student community is astounding. Well done. What advice would you have to the business community around replicating this and building New Zealand's Inc. post-COVID world? So I think the question there is effectively, how do we translate, transfer and apply those same learnings in perhaps a more commercial sense?
Yep. It's a good question. So I like to stick to those sayings around, as we just said, never waste a crisis.
Yeah.
And as I said, when something happens, people want to help.
Yeah.
Like we've got to be more in tune to motivation of when people want to do things. So after COVID, suddenly, you can pick up the phone and talk to people about things that perhaps you couldn't normally talk to them about because everyone, the pace of business just moved very quickly. And I talk about charity as business because it is. It's not a profit business, but it is. It's there's revenue, there's staff, there's resources that teachers now rely on and expect and they like. So we have to do what we do, but. I'm an opportunist, and I think you've got to be creative, but also kill off all the ideas that maybe aren't the best ones, and that's okay too. So I think, a team member of mine is we're having a leaving function for him soon, and he said he's going to write a list of all my half-baked ideas that never happened. And I mean, it was funny. It was he was laughing, but it's also slightly serious of all these different ideas that I've come up with that haven't worked. But it is from having lots of different things and approaching things in a different way. And you know, we're trying to take at work a radically collaborative approach to things, and keep an eye on what you know, we focus on solving a problem with what we do, and then commercialize it afterwards. So
this question has prompted something which I think I know you're working through as well, and I certainly I think the question is a good one in the sense of, in that business sense, and that is where the governors sit. Just real quickly, I know you've been working through a bit of I'll call it a governance succession process. That's certainly something I think is really important in this question. Just 30 seconds on that.
We've refreshed our board through you know, usual process, but particularly with COVID, we suddenly had a totally different business. You know, we run a grocery service, we hold people's money, we deliver people's groceries to vulnerable people. We needed a different skill set, and I'd put my hand up and say, look, I don't know, chief executive, I think I know what I know, but I know there's some known unknowns. So needed help, and so we got a new chair through the process.
Great.
Who's excellent, really senior guy, Paul Reynolds, used to be CEO of the Ministry for the Environment, and you know, he's just stretching me in a huge way, and that means I can stretch my team, and actually we stretch and grow the organisation. And we're trying to move it away. I call myself, you know, chief administrator. Really, we're wanting to grow this as turn from a good organisation that's you've done nice things, good little projects, but actually let's turn it into a great organisation. Let's turn it into something great that can last beyond the people. And I think that's you know, that's what our governance has really done, and really stretch it. They really stretch me, and that's excellent.
So the good thing about that is really there's a great opportunity for, I'll call it the not-for-loss sector, charity sector, to pay it forward to the commercial sector and vice versa, because they both have key roles to play.
Well, but you'd know more about this than me, but often in the non-profit sector, the amount of governance for the amount of turnover is dramatically higher compared to a business. And a lot of business, I've friends who run businesses, they have a much bigger business and much bigger turnover, with much less governance than what we have in the charitable sector. Is that right or not? Really?
Probably maybe less a number of people on the board. But there's certainly the same intensity on the issues. But it reflects the unique space you operate in, where you need, you know, dare I say it, diversity of thinking. So no, that's good.
Well, it's a social license to operate. Actually.
Exactly. And that's why I think both ways are important. So now the questions are really flooding in. Sam, you've really started the train rolling here. A few quick questions, and I'll get on to a couple of deeper ones, which is, could you just quickly repeat, someone's asked those 4 R's of resilience that you had? I like those, actually.
If you just Google 4 R's of resilience, and you'll see a chart or a map or something, but response, recovery, reduction, readiness.
Great.
And as I say, often it's in a line, but draw it in a circle and just put your own business in it. And so we've come out of response, and now we're in the long tail of recovery, and then you move into reduction and readiness. And it's some of it's simultaneous all the time, but I find it's a good, great image around your business model. Good.
That's a good question. Does SVA have any support from government?
We get a bit of support from the lotteries funding, which is you and me, not government. So no, not at the moment. Sadly, we have not seen an increase in any support for volunteering for a long time from government. So
but we'll never say never.
Never say never. Look, I think it's we're a partnership-based organisation. So, like I said, how BDO helps us out, and New World helps us out now too, and the University of Canterbury and a City Care group who run parks maintenance all around the country. And so our business model is partnership based, where we are providing a sort of a marketing-based service and content to partners in exchange for cash that helps us run our projects.
Great.
And we also do fundraising. So if you want to sponsor your kid's school or your old school to be in the program, $100, jump on sva.org.nz and have a look. You asked.
It took you 40 minutes to put that plug in.
Hey, my job to ask. You can say no.
I like it. Here's a real good question. what did SVA do? I love it. When you were quote unquote knocked out, how did the systems adapt? So this is going back to your head trimmer.
Yeah.
It's got a good question.
I mean, at one stage, my team actually sent me home, so I got to work one day, and you notice with my speech sometimes I stutter a little bit now. It's just when it's been a long week, just a bit tired, and got to the stage I could hardly talk and hardly walk, but I still would force myself to try and go to work, and it was pretty bad actually for quite a while. You're still just going to watch yourself with head injuries. It's the most amazing thing. So what did they do? They carried on. And actually they did a great job. Yeah, all kudos to them.
So really it was business as usual largely?
Yeah, it was business as usual. Yeah, but it taught us a few things about key role, like where in the business too much was in my court. So now as my job, I'm trying to make myself redundant more from different parts of the business. So all the partnership and all the fundraising, I did the whole lot of that, and all the relationship building. So we've diversified that, because that's such a huge risk. And so that's my board saying, look, there's too much of this in your area. If you actually leave, or if you are knocked out, the organisation can't survive.
Right.
And also as an organisation that there's I was the poster kid for SBA for a long time, and that's, we've deliberately moved away from that. We wanted to build an organisation where not just about the people involved, and it's been a fundamental shift that's taken quite a few years to make.
Great. Another question I've got here. Oh yes, in terms of your role with Westpac, with the organisation that you meet, someone's asked, actually a couple of people have asked, what's the sort of agenda topics? I think where people are coming from is, what do you guys actually talk about?
Yeah, so we have quarterly meetings with the Westpac's senior exec team, and one annual meeting with the board. And so with the exec team, we get updates, and we get papers like it's a normal board on what issues they're pursuing on against the sustainability strategy, which has been focused on climate change and inequality. So things like, what can the bank do about predatory lending? So there was an unintended consequence a few years ago of a regulation change that saw the rise in predatory lending. So that's your lending trucks and your other types of finance, shark finance. And so what we are is a critical friend, and sort of actually really challenging Westpac's exec team on their social license to operate. That you can do something about this actually. You can change your rules, or your within the what's regulatorily possible, which is banking is tightly regulated as it should be, but we hold up the mirror and say, well, yes, that all looks fine, but actually we think you should be doing more as a business with significant turnover and a significant role. Bankers and lawyers do, in a sense, run the country, I think. So it's open discussion, and it's in the tent. It's positive. It's constructive. It's not we challenge politely and ask questions on different things. It's David McLean, the chief executive's model, really, and I mean he really leads it, and he sets a huge expectation for his team to do well in that space, and brings us in, and there's some pretty challenging people around the table, from different iwi, from Jan Wright, the former Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and people who are real subject experts who can do things. But it is just about stretching thinking. I think it's stretching thinking and being a critical friend. That's what we do. And often you don't necessarily know what we're going to discuss. You know the paper, but you don't know where the conversation's going to go. But importantly, we're in the room together for the day and go through a lot. And it's really impressive that the execs put significant time into it, so that they value it. They're there. They don't always want to be there. And who's this random group of people? That's my saying, not theirs. Of course they want to be there, but these are busy, important people, and so they take the time to hear very different views. And we have very different views. None of us know a heap about banking. So yeah,
wonderful. Right, we'll just go for a few more minutes, and then we'll sort of close off in terms of where to from here. So got some final questions. I love this leading question from Brian, which is, do you want or welcome support?
Yes. Yes, please.
I love the fact it was a closed question.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, look, it's running a not-for-loss organisation or a charity, it is hard, and so we'd love you jump on our website, have a look what we're doing at primary school, at secondary school. We're really, with the decline in church populations and how people used to be involved in political parties and clubs and societies, that's all just going in church. When I say church, it's big decline, and so what we're doing is really trying to lift that back up. Because if I asked you, are you worried about that? Are you worried about the way people are more addicted to their phone than talking to a human? I mean, these are things that are. It's a simple. Start again. Volunteering is a simple solution to a lot of complex problems, I think. So if we use volunteering to develop a more connected society, I think we'll be a better society. So yes, I would love your help, and would love your donations, your support. Have a look. It's not about the funding, but it's also about the other types of support. But have a look, and of course, really happy to chat to you about it more.
So for all the Brians out there, please make contact. That's a great question from us all. So just a couple more. You're getting a lot of praise and anecdotes here, but it's actually good to have the encouragement. I'm interested to know, this is from another questioner, I'm interested to know how you communicate a shared vision effectively so that you get the buy-in across the organisation and mobilise. So I think the key part here is the communication of a shared vision.
So the vision and the whole organisation is built on what the volunteers want to do. So actually, it's really vision through observation of actually the particular group of student leaders at SVA. The whole organisation is built around them now, around what they do, the way they behave, and then we stretch it. We stretch it in different ways to help them do different things in a different way. And we actually are communicating everything now by cartoons. I don't know if that speaks more to our organisation or my intellect or others, but our strategy has to be understood by a 6-year-old and a billionaire, I hope. We have yet to find the billionaire, but we've got lots of 6-year-olds and everyone in between who actually gets what we do. What we do is really simple, but as one of the new strategic advisors said, look, it's actually rocket science because it's so countercultural. We saw the huge rise in church populations after the war and service clubs and political organisations. We've seen that fall off. So service and volunteering, helping others, is what we do. We give people permission, and we communicate it also through their experience. They have to feel it. You have to come to an SVA event and have the most amazing time. It's designed like a tourism event more than volunteering every second Thursday of the month at the such and such organisation. It's got to be fun. They've got to love it. They've got to connect with someone who can be a friend to them, and they've got to feel like they're really useful, no matter what their skills are. We have a lot of young people with disabilities who volunteer with us to help others. Now, their stuff is just they have to feel it and feel they're helping someone. They're not being helped, sure, but they might be helped as well. But it's flipping that around so they feel what we're about in a sense.
Great. All right, I think I'll land on this. There are some other questions, and I'm trying to merge them into the last two we've just had. A question here is, I think it's a good one to finish on, is how would you recommend like a base one or first step for influencing upwards so you get buy-in from your CEO / general manager? And I think what this person's asking is, hey, if you're at the grassroots in the organisation, but you're actually trying to share the vision of what this could be up, and look, there is still hierarchy in a lot of organisations, and we're not saying it's good or bad. How do you kickstart that process?
Do you have any ideas on that for a start? I mean, it's the work that you've done.
I think number one, I'm going to go straight to where we left off before. You've got to have your board engaged, because if that board hasn't given permission and empowerment to the CEO, general manager, it doesn't matter how big or small the organisation is, there has to be that, dare I say it, that vote, that tick of approval to say we can do this here. So I think my step one is you're actually going to go all the way, I'm not going to say to the top, all the way to the board, and see and look to see how that process of engagement occurs. So that's my first point, is getting that. I think secondly, in terms of a step one, I like what I said before, if you have to wait for permission, nothing will happen. So someone, whoever that person is who's asked that question, we need to get mobilised. We need to, in some ways, not arrogantly, but back ourselves that we can actually do this. So they're my initial 2 comments. Is there anything else, Sam, from you, just as we close out here?
My 2 would be motivational interviewing, the technique of helping change someone else's mind. So have a Google of that. And then the second one, there's a good book I love on this. It's not directly on this, but you'll see the relation. Great book called Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
So it's a really cool book on how different people's psychology works and kind of, in a sense, of how to get your way.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Fantastic. Look, there have been a few more questions, but we do need to slowly wheels down, flaps down. We do need to come into land officially. With the support of my team that are in the background here, there are a few other questions, and I think what we'll do is we'll get those added to the web link.
Cool.
So just so you're aware, just on this last slide, later today, my colleagues and part of the BDO team will be, this whole session is being recorded. I'm pleased to say we got to the end relatively safely, Seb, so that's good. But we'll actually load some of those questions up, and if we get a chance, we'll actually have a look at those as well. But if unfortunately they've all come in right at the last moment, but they're really good questions. I feel we've covered 80% of the themes, and I've had to just merge a few of those in. So look, really appreciate everyone's attendance here today. Just before I formally close off and thank Sam, I've got a few little tools. This is paper-based. Also OCP, a number of, I suppose, important things where if you or your team, no matter how small or large you may be, just need to dial into some extra resource and support, we're going to have those links on our website. Now, a lot of this is known stuff. I think the challenge here is we need to almost force ourselves to engage with the process. We've had a few tragic incidents occur in our business recently, and the reality is if we didn't have these tools in place, we would have missed a beat. So look, please avail yourself of those. There's about 4 tools that we've loaded up there for your general readership, and we'd love you to make yourselves available of those, or avail yourself of those. As I said, this recorded presentation will be loaded up this afternoon. Quick shout out for episode 6. Talk about chalk and cheese. We've just had our presentation today on resilience, and the next one's on tax.
Yeah, I don't think I'll come that way. I won't be the speaker. I'll listen in.
I don't actually take that personally, although we had a good joke before about our tax knowledge. Look, we've got 2 of my colleagues, Mark Lotter and Ian Craig, who will be joining us. Now, this is post-election. Isn't that going to be interesting? So that's coming up. What date is it? I'll just check it. It's the 5th of November, which I think is the day before Guy Fawkes. That's all I can remember. So look, please do make yourself, avail yourself of that. And I understand the team is also looking at doing one more significant webinar somewhere in early December to close off the year. So look, really appreciate everyone's attendance. I'm pretty comfortable that we've covered everything. Yes, I have. Sam, I just want to say a huge shout out to you. Thank you for making your time available. It's really, really appreciated. We love working with you. And you got Brian who's going to reach out and help you as well.
Thanks, Brian.
And all the other people that have also put their hand up that we haven't seen yet. But look, thanks very much. I want to wish everyone well for the weekend. I suppose my last bit of advice is if you're doing any hedge trimming this weekend, wear a helmet.
Wear a helmet.
And look after yourself. But thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. For those that are clocking out, all the best for the rest of the day. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
later.
See you.
Bye.